Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. We are Indy investors talking Indy investing, and that's what we like to do on this show. We just like to talk about anything Indy real estate investing related. Hopefully, we can help you out. Our goal is to always provide education along the way, any content that we can provide, any value that we can provide. That's what we want to do. We just want to talk about Indy real estate investing and hope you get the most out of your investments that you're doing here in the wonderful city of Indianapolis. And with that, let's get on with the show. All right, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. I got Neil Perry with me here today, and we actually had a little preview, Neil, on the last episode of this that I just recorded, like right before you and I are recording this. We got talking about inspectors and how to work with inspectors and what to do with inspectors and things like that. So we had a little preview of it last week, so I'm excited to dig into this with you here today. But number one, man, how's it going? Thanks for joining me.
Very good. Thanks for having me. It's 60 plus degrees in Indianapolis and sunny, so what can go wrong, right?
There we go. So we'll take it. It's been an interesting, we haven't had the snow yet, so I'm okay as long as we don't have the snow yet. So we'll see how long that lasts. But no. So Neil, I'd love to just kind of get in a little bit of your background. So you're an inspector. I know you do a lot of inspecting for for investors in general. I know your wife's an agent, so you also kind of understand the retail side of things, and I'm sure you do some inspection on that side. But you also have investment properties of your own. You're flipping properties, and you've done some buy and hold and stuff like that. But before we dig into all that good stuff, I'd love to just kind of know a little bit about your background and how you got into kind of what you're doing today.
Okay, so way back, my mother was a realtor in the 80s. My wife is a realtor. My sister-in-law is a realtor. My other sister-in-law is in title. My uncle's in title. So real estate's like a disease that I was born with, and it's just kind of getting worse every single year.
You didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice.
Yeah, no, there was no choice. I tried to fight it for a little bit in my early 20s, but then I just gave up.
Yeah.
But way back, so I bought my first home in 2001. I can't do the math, but 20 something. It was a HUD home back when HUD homes were really easy to buy and cool to buy. So I bought it for 90, sold it 6 months later for 114, and I was hooked. So it just kind of grew from there. I got my real estate license. I actually got my broker's license in 2003. I have occupied the real estate industry in different capacities kind of since then. Not so much full-time. I've been full-time in real estate for about 10 years now. But so I've had experience on the sales side. I've actually managed a small brokerage. So everything from the inspections to flipping to landlording to the sales side, I've dabbled at least a little bit in. And so kind of back through the 07, 08 tank. At that time, I owned, I think, 6 single family rentals and survived through it. And it took a little break after that, after getting crushed a little bit, like many of us did. I got back into it several years ago, and now I'm primary a little more flip heavy right now because of the COVID restrictions and the moratorium and all that good stuff. But I do, my active job is I own Indianapolis Home Inspections. I just hired another inspector and thinking of bringing on a second. So things have gone really well in this crazy year we've had. I've continuously gotten a little bit busier and busier every month, so that's a good thing. So Indianapolis Home Inspections is my primary, but yes, I do buy and hold. I have bought 4 rentals this year alone using the BRRRR strategy that we all know, and I love. I've flipped 2 or 3, and I've got one under contract right now to flip as well. So things are going well. 2020 has been an interesting but good year for the real estate industry, that is.
Yeah, I know. As we got on here, we were kind of talking about that. Of just like, I kind of feel bad saying it sometimes. It's just like, everything's going well for us in the real estate world and things like that. And a lot of the other industries have been decimated or really hurt in some ways. So it's kind of tough. It's a little bittersweet when saying that. But luckily, why we are doing what we're doing, at least we are providing opportunity. And there are a lot of opportunities for real estate investors and just real estate in general that's going on right now. So Indianapolis Home Inspection, I know I've heard great things about you guys. I think I've tried to book a couple things and you guys have always been busy. So that's all right, but that's a good thing. So let's talk a little bit about that inspection process of kind of what's, so if an investor is really looking to, hey, I need to get an inspection on this home, number one, let's just start with that. So why should an investor just get an inspection on their home of what they're doing? That's kind of always been the thing. I know we always used to buy blind, and we realized like, oh man, our margins, we need to be careful as the prices have rise. Like we need to do a little bit more inspection. So let's talk about that a little bit of just like, why would an investor want to get an inspection? And then kind of what is that process that you guys go through and kind of everything that's entailed with that?
Well, so the reason behind it, it's kind of like insurance. Everybody hates to pay that bill every month until you need it. So I can tell you, I could give literally countless examples of times where an investor has spent the money on an inspection, which saved them an $8,000 repair down the road. So things like sewer line, a camera scope. I'm trying to push more investors to get those inspections done. Not a lot of them want to spend that money, but again, it's kind of like you spend that couple $100 to potentially discover an $8,000 repair down the road. That's a huge gotcha. And an inspection's a lot like that. So as an investor or a contractor, even if you're an out-of-state investors, even if you have a contractor walk the property, chances are they're not going to get in your crawl space. They're not going to take your electrical panel cover off to see what's going on back there. We get in the nooks and crannies that you don't typically go through when looking at a home, especially as an investor. Sometimes contractors will, but if you're the investor, oftentimes you're not going to get all up close and personal with the home. So the why behind that is to just kind of, it basically creates a scope of work for you. And a lot of my investor clients use it as that. They have me do the inspection and they pass my inspection report right onto their contractor and say, how much is this going to cost to make this right? Mm-hmm. So at the very base level, that would be the biggest why behind it.
Yeah, definitely. So, and I want to talk a little bit about this is what got brought up in the last podcast that we just did with Mahir, is that kind of when he started off, he had an inspector that would go out, and they were basically like a retail inspector. Like they weren't used to buying, used to what investors look at. We like the stuff that we can add value to and things. So what's a little bit different when you are looking at, hey, I'm inspecting this for that retail buyer / thing, or hey, I'm looking at this for an investor and I have to look through it through their eyes. So is there any difference in that, or how you go about that process a little differently maybe?
Well, my insurance would probably complain if I get into too many of those dirty little details.
Can we say off the record or not? I think we can do something.
Right. Absolutely. So if I'm doing a retail inspection, to be completely honest, my core focus is to point out everything that's going to keep me from getting sued. To be bluntly honest. So like if I'm doing an inspection for an investor that's going to buy and hold this property, my mindset is, what do they need to fix to potentially keep them from getting sued? And then if they're going to flip the house, what's going to keep this transaction moving towards closing without, squashing the deal? So in that case, they pretty much kind of have to fix everything. So yeah, I tend to focus a little heavier on different areas when I'm doing an inspection for a retail buyer versus an investor, and what type of investor. It's always a thorough inspection. I always check the same things over and over. I just overemphasize certain different areas to different buyer types. So a lot of buyers in the retail side, if you mention the word mold, it's like the worst 4-letter word on the planet, and they panic and they, some run like crazy. It's not scary most of the times. It's a super easy fix most of the times. So I have conversations in different ways when I'm, depending on the type of buyer that I'm working with. An investor is used to hearing that word, so I tend to skim over that a little bit more than I would like a retail buyer. I don't have to talk investors off the ledge quite as often as I do some retail buyers. So yeah, my conversations with the different types of buyers, they evolve based on the type of buyer, the personality of the buyer. A lot of things come into play, but yeah. So for an investor mindset, I have personally taken apart and put back together more homes than I can count. So I tend to talk numbers a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I tend to talk about what you might find when peeling back that onion. a little bit more, because they're not so, scared of what they might find. They're used to it, and they're expecting it sometimes. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I found that very very important. Like working with inspectors and just letting them know like, hey, these are my intentions with the property, of just so they know they have a heads up of like, because it's going to be a little different if it's a buy and hold. You're looking into the views of like, okay, I have to make sure this is good for the tenant, good for everything. There's a lot of things involved versus a flip where I'm just going to gut everything anyway. Probably what are the big things I really need to focus on. So I think it's always important and stuff. So Neil, what are some things that when it comes to just inspections in general that maybe that pop up here in the Indianapolis market that maybe in other markets or other places around the US, people wouldn't be kind of aware of, or what are some things that maybe are specific to Indianapolis that you see people need to consider with their inspections or when they're buying a home?
yeah, so some of the investor heavy markets, like inside the loop, inside 465, you see things that are a little bit different outside the loop. And like, for example, yesterday I did an inspection for an apartment complex, Colorado investor, and didn't know anything about oil tanks, and what to do when you find one. So things like that. There's a process to alleviate just about every issue out there. Things like block foundations, or a mason block or brick basement. There's certain conversations that I have with those investors to explain that those are normal here. They may not be normal everywhere, and here's kind of what you need to do to alleviate some of the issues that come with those things. Um, Basements are a big thing, like you and I were talking about just a bit ago. If it's a block foundation built in 1940, it's going to get wet. It's a wet basement, and they call it a wet basement for a reason. But there are things that you can do to alleviate some of those moisture issues.
Right.
Things like asbestos or lead-based paint can be scary for a lot of people, but there's a process to get around those things and to remediate or alleviate some of the concern with when it comes to those things.
Yeah. So one of the things I kind of, I'm kind of chuckling as I'm thinking about this, because just through this conversation, I can tell like you've seen it all, you've been through it all, you've torn it all out and rebuilt it and stuff like that. So you can tell by the calmness that you're like having this conversation where, as some of these investors that I'm working with or that are buying from us of like, oh, what? No, there's a basement. I thought it was a slab. No, I don't want it. There's a basement. Or, little words like you said, mold and, asbestos and things. All this stuff is remediable. It can be fixed, and there's a process behind some of all this stuff. So if you're working with an investor, or you hear that investor is like, oh no, there's a chance that this basement might leak or things like that. Like when they get scared by that, do you think there's when it comes to that, is there a bigger standpoint of people like maybe that are walking away from deals that are still good deals that are right in front of them that can just have little fixes that can help out? So can you talk to that about that a little bit of just like maybe not passing on deals because of something sounds scary or looks scary just because you don't have any, you might not have an experience with it, but hey, it's still easy. And by asking the right questions and by going about, knowing the right people, you can really get this fixed, and it's not really that big of a deal.
Yeah, and that comes up quite often, more so with newer investors, people that haven't written those checks quite yet for a $9,000 foundation repair kind of thing. And that's the biggest thing with the inspection is if you can budget for it up front and know that it's there, that's more than half the battle, in my opinion. But yeah, when I discover even potentially costly repairs like foundation issues, or having to put in post piers and rebuild a flooring system because of termite damage or things like that, I can tell that there's going to be some shock factor. So I do word them in a way and kind of prep them for what they're facing. And I use phrases like, if I were personally going to buy this as an investment, I would not run from this property at this point, kind of thing. And I preface a lot of conversations with that, hoping to kind of alleviate some of the panic that is involved with potential unknowns, because unknowns are, although unfortunate and expensive, they are kind of part of the game. So of the unknowns, but when I see some of the bigger factors or some of the bigger potential issues, I'm bluntly honest with them. prep for this, and here's your worst case scenario, which I don't think is going to happen, and here's your best case scenario. You're probably going to land somewhere in the middle. And there have been times where I'll be bluntly honest and say you do not want to proceed unless at least get some numbers, so
Yeah.
then you can make an educated decision.
No, that's great, man. I really appreciate that. And I do
So
want to, I want to switch gears here a little bit on just, you know, to get into more of your investing and talk about, oh, there we go. You got me, Neil?
yeah, breaking up just a little bit.
Sorry. So I think we're good now. So I do want to switch gears a little bit and kind of get to more of your investing and talk about kind of your experiences and kind of some things that you've learned along the way. Is there anything else that we need to go over when it comes to inspections or anything else that you want to point out or talk about that investors should know about?
No, one thing I would recommend though, if you're an investor, whether out of state or local, for the first several, it's incredibly beneficial for you to attend the inspection. I talk a lot through, especially with investors. Here's what you can look for, and I'll pull up pictures on my phone even if I don't find an issue there. So there's a lot of coaching involved, and I have personally written the checks, so I know what it's like to get into a deal that snowballs into 20 grand over budget kind of thing. So, and I thoroughly enjoy it. You know, this is a fun game that we all play in, and the more networking and the more knowledge we can acquire from each other, the better, in my opinion. So attend your inspections at least at first until you become well versed in what you're looking for. And I'm always happy to answer questions during and after the inspection.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good tip. I think it's just something that we kind of preach all along. If you're wanting to flip a property, like, you know, go along with a flipper, walk through the houses with them. You're trying to wholesale property, go through the process with them, sit with them for a day, that kind of stuff. So same thing with that inspection. I think it's a really good idea or a really good tip to go out there and walk through with the inspector, see what they're seeing, understand their language and things like that. Somebody that's been through a lot of it, because you said, like, you enjoy that education aspect of it, you enjoy that teaching aspect of it, and being able to help somebody out. So I think it's really valuable. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, sure thing.
So you mentioned of that, writing that check or having that $20,000 mistake. So let's just jump into that right there. So what happened to that one?
Well, so it was a combination of that ones. So I mentioned I owned 6 or 7 single family rentals back before the last market crash in 07, 08, and facing a big unknown right now with all the things going on. One tip I would give to other investors who are buying holds or flips right now, if you own rentals, in my opinion, I panicked last time and I fell on my face. This time I will not. Had I hunkered down and kept my rentals at the time that the market crashed last time, I'd be a couple $100,000 over. I may not be working at this point with values having tripled and quadrupled since then. So one tip I would say, if you're a landlord right now, even if you can't evict, I would say hunker down, bear through it, and wait for the market to correct, and then get out if you're tired of the battles. But facing these unknown times, my experience was I sold, and I've regretted it ever since. So live and learn.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. Something too of just making sure that you can afford to kind of go through if something does happen. If kind of looking at your books and kind of understanding where you are. If something happens and I'm not getting rent, or I can't, I'm not getting anything to help out with my payments, how long can I last? Can I last 3 months, 6 months, a year, to, whatever that may be? Knowing where you are with your numbers, I think it's super important. And then not over leveraging yourself when it comes to, especially, some people that are going through the BRRRR strategy or, financing, incredibly on, some of these deals. So knowing where you are, because, it's a wholesaler's famous last words is like, man, if only I would have kept on, or if only I would have bought that property myself or held on to that. That always comes into play. But, when you're going through, you've lived through that and you've kind of seen the ends of that. I love the fact that you brought up of like, hey, where I didn't do this last time, I'm going to be ready for it this time. I'm not going to do through that again and stuff like that. So that's awesome, man. So what did you do to kind of make sure that you were like, hey, no, I'm good here? Is it just living through that one, the last time, or is there something that you did for yourself to make sure you were ready for something like this?
Well, combination of a lot of things. A lot more education this time around. The internet is prevalent, and we have podcasts and YouTube and everything to better educate yourself before jumping into real estate. Back then, it was AOL dial-up, and I'm showing my age there, but it is what it is.
Searching for help on instant messenger and stuff.
That's chat rooms. Chat rooms were incredibly unhelpful back then. um, but yeah, a combination of all those things. So buy them right. I've learned a lot about pass up a deal before I can make this work kind of thing. Run your numbers and stick to them is a hard lesson that I learned last time. Because going into that crash, the market was so good, just like it is right now. You thought maybe I can overpay for this and make it work. I learned a hard lesson back then, so I created parameters and I stick to them now. So as far as the BRRRR strategy, I wait for the right deals to come by. Could I have bought twice as many this year? Probably. But again, going into some unknown times, and truthfully with real estate and the economy, we're always kind of in some unknown times. So
Right.
I'd rather slow and steady wins the race, right? So that's kind of my strategy this time going around.
No, that's great. That's good advice. I know before we jumped on here, you and I were kind of having a conversation of kind of like where some of your flips are and where things are going at right now. You mind sharing with everybody kind of just what you're talking about? Like, hey, I'm kind of focused more on, maybe I'm going to stick down south. I mean, that's where you live and stuff. But hey, you were kind of saying like, hey, I'm not quite sure about some of the stuff that's closer to the downtown. I'm going to kind of let my parameters go out, circumference wise a little bit more from that. So you want to share kind of where you are, like how you're choosing your flips are, or how you're choosing your flips now, and there's projects that you want to take on?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of focus, and I think last time around I would just find a deal and I would drive to the northwest side if it was a good enough deal, where that stretches your time thin, that stretches your contractor's time thin, and unfortunately in this game, time is money. So if you're chewing up your time, it's drive time that's completely unproductive. So I've narrowed my focus to I buy mostly in Garfield Park or Bean Creek going south. Now down here in Johnson County, the deals aren't quite as prevalent as they are a little bit north of here, but all of my rentals are in Garfield Park. I just got one under contract in Bean Creek, U of I area, or the St. Rock area. I like that area as well. The market is pretty strong there. It's a revitalization zone, so there are a lot of benefits from a CapEx perspective there for new buyers anyway. So I've narrowed my focus. A deal is a deal, but if you can't facilitate or service that deal efficiently, it becomes less of a deal. So I have focused my area to a county, which is Johnson, only because I live in kind of in the middle of Johnson County, but and then just north of Johnson County. So areas that I focus mostly on: Garfield Park, Bean Creek. Franklin, Indiana is a great market. If anybody's looking down there, it's a beautiful, great little town. Perry Township is still a strong area. Franklin Township is growing like crazy. Center Grove, you can't invest in Center Grove anymore. You can't even buy down here for less than 200 anymore, unfortunately. But I think it's smarter for investors to kind of focus you narrow your search, I should say. Your contractors will appreciate it. And in my opinion, that's a smart approach.
Great advice. Great advice. I appreciate that. So, Neil, we're running a little bit short on time. I got a couple other questions for you. So, just this next question is there any other, like maybe mistakes or any other things that stand out that maybe you've made or you see investors making that we should just talk about or just bring up today?
Probably the biggest one is sewer line scopes. I cannot harp on that enough. Sewer line scopes are so incredibly important. If the house is more than about 20 years old, the material type that they used, especially if you're buying inside the loop, a house built in 1940, there's a decent chance that clay tile has failed. So sewer line scopes can get incredibly expensive, and a $300 inspection up front could potentially save you mountains of money and frustration and time and delays and all of that, and results into stressful situations. So get your sewer lines go, whether you do it with me, Roto Rooter, Wiley, it doesn't matter. Just have them done and spend that little bit extra money to have some peace of mind.
Yeah, those big, mature, beautiful trees, they look awesome. They look amazing for the landscape, but they do some damage to the sewer lines. I have
Yeah,
found that out myself. So,
that's for
no.
sure.
So, Neil, I really appreciate it. All your insights, all your time, man. I really appreciate you being on here. I do have one more question for you because I've noticed that you on Facebook over the last couple of months, you have been traveling to some pretty amazing places, and I'm very jealous because I love the outdoors. I love hiking and stuff like that. But I got to know what's the best kind of like area or place to go that you visited in the last couple of months.
So my favorite trip ever, my wife and I went to Jackson Hole. I'm a big snow skier, so I know you had mentioned you don't want the snow, but I welcome it. Bring
Yeah.
it on. I'm ready to hit the slopes. But we went to Jackson Hole, and although I've been thinking about skiing the Jackson Hole summit since I was about 5 years old, snowmobiling through Yellowstone National Park in the wintertime was probably the best experience of my life. We against our instructors or our tour guides guidance, we took a selfie with a wild buffalo. Probably not smart, but we did. But to see that park in that landscape was absolutely breathtaking. It was amazing.
So
Strongly
awesome.
recommend.
All right, I'll put that on my list for sure. Then even with the snow, it sounds like I got to do that one. So
I'll meet you out there.
that's awesome, man. So Neil, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Like you brought definitely some value here. If somebody has some questions or just wants to reach out to you, maybe they need an inspection done, where's the best place for them to go?
So you can see actually book online with directly tied to my schedule. It's all automated at www.ihinspections.com. If you have questions, you're welcome to text or call me 317-966-9499 or Facebook at Indianapolis Home Inspections. Those are all good places to reach out.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And if you need me for anything, if you have any questions or have any input on like, hey, I wish they would do a show on this or talk about this, hit me up at brian@simplewholesaling.com. And with that, that's a wrap. That's another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. Take care, guys.
Thanks so much.